Ashamed of me, my husband introduced his mistress as his wife. He forgot one thing. I own his entire empire. He ended up regretting it from a jail cell. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, grab a warm cup of tea and get comfortable. I'd love to know what time of day you're watching this video. Please comment M for morning A, for afternoon, or E for evening. Now let me take you into this story. The heavy oak doors of the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom were cracked open just an inch, but that was enough. It was enough for me to see the crystal chandeliers casting a warm golden glow over the creme de la creme of New York City's business elite. It was enough for me to see the waiters circulating with trays of champagne, the flash of diamonds on manicured hands, and the expensive suits that cost more than my first car. But most importantly, it was enough for me to see him. Ethan, my husband of 20 years. He stood on the raised platform, bathed in the spotlight, looking more handsome and commanding than I had seen him in a decade. He held a microphone in one hand, his posture radiating the kind of arrogance that comes with unchecked success. But his other hand, that was what made my breath hitch in my throat. His other hand was resting possessively on the waist of a woman standing next to him. She wasn't a colleague. She wasn't a client. She was Jessica, his 26-year-old executive assistant. She was wearing a shimmering red gown that clung to her figure like a second skin, her hair cascading in perfect waves, her smile dazzling and predatory. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. My fingers gripped the velvet lining of the doorframe so hard my knuckles turned white. What is he doing, I thought. Why is she up there with him? Then Ethan raised his glass. The room fell silent. His voice boomed through the speakers, smooth and confident. Tonight is a celebration of a new era for Hayes Industries. See, he announced, beaming at the crowd. But no man builds an empire alone. I want to introduce you to the woman who makes it all possible. The love of my life, my rock. Please give a warm round of applause for my beautiful wife, Mrs. Hayes. The room erupted in applause, but he wasn't looking at me. He wasn't looking at the door where I stood hidden in the shadows, wearing my sensible beige coat over a dress that suddenly felt 10 years out of style. He was looking at Jessica, and Jessica was smiling, waving to the crowd, accepting the title that belonged to me, accepting the life that belonged to me. My heart didn't just break, it shattered. The humiliation washed over me like a tidal wave of ice water. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm in there and tear that microphone from his hand. But my feet were frozen. I was paralyzed by the sheer audacity of his lie, ashamed of his wife. A man takes his mistress to a party and says she is his wife, and I was witnessing it happen in real time. Before I tell you what happened next, before I tell you about the chaos that erupted and the revenge that would eventually bring that man to his knees, I need to take you back. You need to understand how we got here. You need to understand that this moment wasn't just a singular event. It was the climax of 1,000 tiny cuts. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. If you are watching from New York City or anywhere else in the world, drop your city in the comments. I love seeing how far our community reaches. Now let's go back to where this day actually started. It began 12 hours earlier in our kitchen in Greenwich. The morning sunlight was streaming through the windows, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air. I was at the stove flipping pancakes, Blueberry, his favorite. I had been up since 5, ironing his navy suit, making sure the crease in his trousers was razor sharp. I wanted everything to be perfect. Ethan came down the stairs already on his phone. He didn't look at me. He didn't smell the coffee or the fresh batter. He just walked straight to the coffee pot, poured a cup, and leaned against the counter, typing furiously. "Good morning," I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful. "I made breakfast. Sit down. You have a big day." He glanced up, his eyes scanning me with a look I had come to dread. It was a look of boredom mixed with mild distaste. He looked at my messy bun, my loose t-shirt, my bare face. "I don't have time for pancakes, Claire," he snapped, taking a sip of coffee and grimacing. "And for God's sake, look at you. You look like you gave up on life 5 years ago." I flinched. I was going to get dressed after you left. I wanted to make sure you had a good start to the day." He rolled his eyes. "The gala is tonight. Don't wait up. It's just a boring investor meeting." Mostly numbers and charts. You'd hate it. Plus, it's spouse optional. And honestly, Claire, you wouldn't fit in. You're too domestic for this crowd. I could dress up, I offered quietly. I still have that black dress from... No, he cut me off sharply. I said no. Stay home. Read a book. Do whatever it is you do all day. He set his cup down, checked his watch, and grabbed his briefcase. As he brushed past me, I caught a scent. It wasn't his usual sandalwood musk. It was something sharper, citrusy, and expensive. A cologne I had bought him for Christmas 3 years ago that he claimed he hated. Why was he wearing it now? Then his phone buzzed on the counter. He had left it there for a split second while adjusting his tie. The screen lit up. A message from Jay. Can't wait for tonight. Wear the blue tie. It matches my eyes. My stomach dropped. Ethan snatched the phone up before I could say a word, slipping it into his pocket with a practiced smoothness that terrified me. I'm leaving, he said. Don't call me unless the house is burning down. The door slammed shut. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at the stack of blueberry pancakes steaming and untouched. I looked at my reflection in the oven door, a woman who had given everything, every ounce of her youth and brilliance, to a man who was now ashamed to be seen with her. I spent the day in a fog of anxiety. Jay. Who is Jay? And why did he lie about the cologne? Why was he so adamant? I stay home. The doubt gnawed at me, turning into a physical pain in my chest. By 6 p.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I put on the best dress I could find, a navy silk number that was elegant, if a bit conservative, and I drove to the city. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I would just surprise him, buy him a drink, and we would laugh about my silly insecurities. But standing there at the Plaza Hotel, listening to him call another woman his wife, I realized the joke was on me. And the punchline was brutal. The applause in the ballroom began to die down, replaced by the murmur of impressed conversation. I watched as Ethan leaned in and kissed Jessica on the cheek, a lingering, intimate gesture that made bile rise in my throat. He looked so proud not of her but of himself, of the image he had constructed, the powerful CEO and his trophy wife. I should have turned around. I should have walked away and called a lawyer right then. But shock is a funny thing. It roots you to the spot. I just stared my brain trying to process the impossibility of the scene, and then it happened. A man stepped out from the crowd near the front of the stage. He was tall with silver-streaked hair and a demeanor that commanded respect even without a microphone. It was Mark Jennings. My breath caught. Mark was an old friend from our college days, a brilliant tech investor who had always been kind to me. He had been one of the few people who actually asked about my work during the early days of Hayes Industries, back when Ethan was just the loudmouth with the ideas, and I was the one coding in the basement. We hadn't seen him in years, but Ethan had been desperate to land a partnership with Mark's firm. Mark held up a hand, his voice cutting through the ambient noise like a knife. "Excuse me, Mr. Hayes," Mark said, loud enough for the people around him to hear. The room quieted down, sensing tension. Ethan smiled, though it looked a bit tight. "Ah, Mark, wonderful to see you. We can discuss business later. Tonight is for celebration." "I'm confused." Mark continued, his tone dangerously calm. He took a sip of his wine, his eyes locking onto Ethan's. "You just introduced this young woman as your wife." "Yes," Ethan said, patting Jessica's hand. "My better half." "That's strange," Mark said, his voice carrying clearly now. "Because I could have sworn your wife's name is Claire. We went to school together at Columbia. I remember her quite vividly, intelligent brunette about my age. Unless my memory is failing me, this," he gestured dismissively at Jessica, "is not Claire." A ripple of whispers spread through the room. The air grew thick with awkward tension. Jessica's smile faltered. She looked at Ethan, her eyes wide with panic. Ethan's face turned a shade of red I had rarely seen. He chuckled nervously, adjusting his tie. "Ah, well, Mark, it's complicated. There's been a misunderstanding." "It doesn't seem complicated," Mark pressed. "It seems like a lie." Ethan's expression hardened. He leaned into the microphone, his voice dropping to a tone of mock sympathy that made my skin crawl. "Look, Mark, I didn't want to bring this up publicly, but since you asked, Claire and I are separated. She's not well mentally. She's been struggling with severe delusions and instability for years. It's been heartbreaking. This is Jessica, my fiancée. We're just trying to move forward. Mentally unstable. The words hit me harder than a physical blow. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. He wasn't just erasing me. He was destroying my reputation to cover his tracks. He was painting me as a crazy ex-wife to justify parading his mistress around. Mark didn't look convinced. In fact, he looked disgusted. "I see," Mark said coldly. "I don't do business with men who rewrite history, Ethan, and I certainly don't invest in liars." Mark turned his back on the stage. The murmurs in the room grew louder, turning into open gossip. Ethan looked furious, whispering something harsh to Jessica, who looked like she wanted to disappear. I couldn't watch anymore. The shame was burning me alive. If I stepped in now, if I screamed that I was sane, that I was his wife, would they believe me? Or would they see a frantic, disheveled woman and believe Ethan's lie about my mental state? I turned and ran. I ran down the plush-carpeted hallway, past the confused doorman, and out into the biting New York wind. I didn't stop until I reached my car in the parking garage. I scrambled inside, locked the doors, and just screamed a guttural, raw sound that tore at my throat. I gripped the steering wheel, my body shaking so hard I could barely put the key in the ignition. Mentally unstable, delusional. Is that what he tells people? Is that why our old friends stopped calling? Is that why I felt so isolated? I drove home in a blur. The highway lights smeared into long streaks of neon. The radio was off, but my mind was loud. I thought about the last 20 years. I thought about the nights I stayed up coding the back end of his software while he slept. I thought about the time I sold my inheritance to bail the company out of debt. I thought about the baby we lost and how he told me to get over it because the company needed focus. I had built him block by block, line of code by line of code. I had built the pedestal he was standing on, and he had just used that height to kick me in the face. By the time I pulled into the driveway of our empty, dark house, the tears had stopped. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by something colder, something harder. I walked into the house, but I didn't go to the bedroom to cry. I didn't go to the kitchen to stress eat. I walked straight into his home office and turned on his computer. He thought I was the domestic wife. He thought I was just the woman who made pancakes. He forgot that before I was Mrs. Hayes, I was Claire Thompson, the top analyst in my class. And tonight, I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to audit my marriage. The blue light of the computer monitor washed over my face, illuminating the dark office. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I knew his passwords not because he gave them to me, but because Ethan was a creature of habit. He used variations of his own name and his birthday. Narcissism makes for terrible cybersecurity. I logged into our joint bank account first. The balance looked normal enough to pay the bills, buy groceries, maybe a modest vacation, but I knew better. You don't rent the grand ballroom at the plaza and buy custom Italian suits on this kind of budget. I navigated to the transaction history. Nothing unusual, just the mortgage utilities, the country club membership. But then I saw a recurring transfer of $4,500 every month to an entity labeled JC Consulting. Who is JC Consulting? I opened a new tab and searched the state business registry. My fingers flew across the keys. I felt like I was back in my old cubicle hunting down discrepancies in financial reports. The muscle memory was still there, dormant, but alive. There it was, JC Consulting, LLC, registered agent Jessica Miller. The room spun slightly. He was paying her a salary out of our joint funds. No, wait. I looked closer at the dates. These transfers started 2 years ago. 2 years. He had been funding her lifestyle for 2 years while telling me we needed to tighten our belts because the market was volatile. I dug deeper. I accessed the credit card statements, the ones he insisted on paperless billing for, linked to an email address I didn't need to worry about. I guessed the password for that email on the third try, Empire Builder one. The statements were a graveyard of my marriage. August 12th, the Ritz-Carlton, Maui. He told me he was at a tech conference in Seattle. September 5th, Tiffany & Company, $50,000. Item description: diamond tennis necklace. I stopped breathing. $50,000. My hand flew to my neck, touching bare skin. The only jewelry I wore was my simple wedding band and a small locket. $50,000 was exactly the amount my parents had left me when they passed a safety net I had transferred into our savings for our future. He hadn't just cheated on me, he had stolen my parents' legacy to drape diamonds around his mistress's neck. A sound at the front door made me freeze, the heavy thud of the lock turning. He was home. I quickly closed the browser windows, clearing the history with a few rapid keystrokes. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I couldn't let him know I knew. Not yet. I needed more than just anger. I needed leverage. I turned off the monitor and slipped out of the office, moving silently up the stairs, just as the front door swung open. I dove into bed, pulling the duvet up to my chin, feigning sleep. "Claire?" Ethan's voice floated up the stairs. It was slurred. "You awake?" I didn't answer. I heard his heavy footsteps climbing the stairs. He stumbled into the bedroom, bringing with him the stench of stale champagne cigar smoke and that sharp, citrusy perfume. It filled the room, choking me. He didn't bother to be quiet. He tossed his jacket on the floor, kicked off his shoes, and collapsed onto the bed beside me. He didn't check on me. He didn't kiss my forehead. He just groaned and rolled over. "Stupid Mark," he muttered into the pillow, his voice thick with drunkenness. "Self-righteous prick. Who cares who the wife is? It's about the image." I lay there staring at the ceiling in the darkness. My body was rigid. Every instinct screamed at me to grab the lamp and smash it over his head, to scream about the diamonds, about Jessica, about the lies. But then I remembered what he said on stage. Mentally unstable. If I reacted now, if I woke him up screaming, I would only prove him right. He would gaslight me. He would say I was hysterical. He would use my anger against me in court. No. I closed my eyes, forcing my breathing to slow down. "Good night, Ethan," I whispered into the dark, though he was already snoring. Tomorrow the grieving wife would die. Tomorrow the domestic doormat would vanish. Tomorrow Claire Thompson, the woman who wrote the code that built his empire, was coming back to life. And she was going to burn his kingdom to the ground. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. I needed to remember the woman I used to be before I let him erase me. Lying next to the man who had just publicly disowned me, I couldn't sleep. My mind drifted back 20 years into the past, trying to pinpoint the exact moment I had lost myself. I wasn't always just Mrs. Hayes. Back at Columbia University, I was Claire Thompson. I was the girl in the back of the lecture hall who corrected the professor's equations on the chalkboard. I was the one who graduated summa cum laude in quantitative finance. I had recruiters from Wall Street lining up at my dorm room door. Then I met Ethan. He was charming, yes. He had a smile that could sell ice to a polar bear. But he was struggling. He had a vision for a financial software platform, something that could predict market trends for small businesses, but he didn't have the technical skill to build it. He was all sales, no product. I remember our first date at a cheap diner. He was sketching ideas on a napkin, his eyes lit up with passion. "Imagine Claire," he had said, grabbing my hand. "We could change the industry, but I can't do the math. I need a genius." He called me a genius. Then I fell in love with the dream, and I fell in love with the way he looked at me like I was the missing puzzle piece to his greatness. So I turned down the job at Goldman Sachs. I turned down the PhD program at MIT. I moved into a cramped apartment with Ethan and spent the next 2 years coding. I wrote the algorithm, that famous Hayes prediction model that made us millions. That was me. It was my logic, my syntax, my sleepless nights. Ethan handled the investors, the dinners, the handshakes. "You're the brain, I'm the face," he used to tell me, kissing my forehead as I slumped over the keyboard at 3 a.m. "It's better this way, Claire. Investors, they're old school. They trust a man in a suit more than a woman in a hoodie. But don't worry, it's our company. 50-50 always." I believed him. God, I was so young and so stupid. I believed him when he said we didn't need to put my name on the patent because it would complicate the filing process. I believed him when he said I should stay off the board of directors to avoid conflicts of interest. And then came the baby, or the almost baby. I was 6 months pregnant when the company finally went public. We were celebrating. Then the pain started. I remember the ambulance, the bright lights, the crushing devastation of leaving the hospital with empty arms. I was drowning in grief. I needed my husband. But Ethan was busy ringing the opening bell at the stock exchange. When he finally came home 3 days later, he found me sitting in the nursery we had painted yellow. He didn't hold me. He stood in the doorway and said, "Claire, you need to pull yourself together. The algorithm is glitching. We're losing clients. I need you to fix it." "I just lost our child," I had whispered. "And if you don't fix the code, we'll lose the company too," he replied, cold and pragmatic. "Work will help you forget. Do it for us." So I did. I buried my grief in lines of code. I saved the company. And in return, he slowly, methodically pushed me into the shadows. He hired staff I wasn't allowed to talk to. He stopped inviting me to events. He convinced me that I was fragile after the miscarriage, that the stress of the business world was too much for me. "Stay home, Claire," he'd say. "Gardening is good for your nerves. Let me handle the heavy lifting." It wasn't protection. It was containment. He was locking away the only person who knew that he was a fraud. He needed my brain on standby, but he wanted my presence erased. Tears pricked my eyes in the dark bedroom, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of clarity. I looked at the snoring lump of a man beside me. He was wearing silk pajamas bought with money earned from my algorithm. He was dreaming of a mistress wearing diamonds bought with my inheritance. He had taken my career. He had taken my confidence. He had capitalized on my trauma. But he had made one critical mistake. He forgot that I built the system. And the thing about being the architect is that you know exactly where the structural weaknesses are. You know exactly which beam to pull to bring the whole house crashing down. The morning sun began to creep through the curtains. I didn't make pancakes. I got up, showered, and put on a sharp blazer I hadn't worn in years. I didn't look at Ethan. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. I had an appointment to make. And this time, I wasn't going to be the supportive wife. I was going to be the plaintiff. The law office of Susan Adler and Associates smelled like old leather and expensive intimidation. Susan had been my roommate freshman year, a firecracker of a woman who argued with professors for sport. Now she was New York's most feared divorce attorney. They called her the Barracuda. When I walked into her office, Susan didn't offer me tea. She took one look at my face, stood up, and locked the door. "You look like hell, Claire," she said, her voice raspy from years of courtroom battles. "Sit down. Tell me everything." I did. I told her about the party, the mentally unstable comment, the diamonds, the shell companies. I laid it all out, my voice trembling at first, then growing steadier as the facts took over. Susan listened, taking furious notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back and took off her glasses. "Okay," she said. "The bad news first. Ethan has been planning this for a while. Those transfers to JC Consulting, that's classic dissipation of assets. He's draining the marital pot so there's nothing left to split when he files. He's trying to starve you out." "I know," I said. "He froze the credit cards this morning. I tried to buy gas and it was declined. He's playing dirty." Susan nodded. "He wants you desperate, so you'll sign whatever settlement he throws at you just to survive. Do you have access to any cash, real liquid cash?" I shook my head. "Our joint savings are emptied, my personal account. He convinced me to merge it years ago." Susan sighed, tapping her pen. "We need a retainer, Claire, and we need to hire a forensic accountant to trace those shell companies. That's not cheap." I reached into my purse. My hands were shaking slightly as I pulled out a small velvet pouch. I tipped it over, and a brooch slid onto Susan's mahogany desk. It was a sapphire surrounded by old-cut diamonds glowing deep blue in the office light. "This was my grandmother's," I said, my voice catching. "It's the only thing I have that he doesn't know about. He thinks it's costume jewelry. It's worth at least $20,000. Susan looked at the brooch, then at me. Her expression softened for the first time. "Claire, are you sure? Sell it. I said firmly. I don't need jewelry. I need a war chest. Susan nodded slowly. Done. I'll have my guy handle it today. She picked up her pen again. Now, let's talk strategy. Ethan thinks he holds all the cards because he controls the money and the company name. But does he have a weakness? He's arrogant, I said, and he's lazy. Good, but I need legal leverage. Think, Claire. Is there anything in the business structure, the contracts, the intellectual property? I paused. My mind flashed back to those nights 20 years ago, the smell of cold pizza and the hum of the server. The code? I whispered. What? The original source code for the Hayes prediction model. I said, my heart starting to race. When we incorporated, Ethan was so obsessed with the branding and the logo he filed the trademark paperwork himself. But the copyright for the software architecture, he told me to handle it because it was technical, boring stuff. Susan leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. And I filed it. I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. But the software wasn't finished yet. It was technically a pre-beta version. In the rush to launch, we never updated the assignment of rights to the corporation. The original copyright for the core architecture, the foundation that the entire company runs on, is in your name. Susan finished the sentence, her eyes widening. It's signed C. Thompson, I confirmed. And inside the code, deep in the kernel where no one looks, there's a digital watermark. It's the date I lost the baby. Silence filled the room. Heavy, pregnant silence. Susan let out a low whistle. Holy Mother of God! Claire, do you realize what this means? If the company is using software that belongs to you and they never paid you for it or secured a license, then they are operating illegally, I said. And I own the foundation of his entire empire. He doesn't just owe you alimony. Susan grinned, and it was a terrifying, beautiful sight. He owes you royalties, 20 years of retroactive royalties. We can bankrupt him. We can take the whole damn company. I don't want the company, I said, standing up. I want him to hurt. I want him to feel as small and powerless as he made me feel last night. We can do that, Susan said. But we have to be smart. You have to go back there. My stomach dropped. What? No, I can't live with him. You have to, Susan insisted. If you leave the marital home now, he can claim abandonment. Plus, we need evidence. Hard evidence of the affair to destroy his crazy wife narrative and prove dissipation of assets. You need to be inside the house. You need to play the part of the confused, sad wife just a little longer. Can you do that? I thought about Jessica's smirk. I thought about Ethan's hand on her waist. I can do it, I said. Good, Susan said. Go home. Let him think he's won. Let him get comfortable, and while he's distracted, we sharpen the knives. I left the office feeling lighter than I had in years. I had no money, no husband, and no home of my own, but I had a secret weapon. Ethan Hayes thought he was the king of the castle. He didn't realize he was living in a house of cards, and I was holding the match. But I wasn't prepared for how far he would push me that very night. Driving back to the house felt like driving into a war zone where only one side had guns. I parked the car, took a deep breath, and prepared to play the role Susan had assigned me, the defeated, confused wife. I walked in to find the living room lights blazing. Music was playing smooth jazz, the kind Ethan liked when he was trying to impress someone. And there they were. Ethan was sitting on the leather sofa holding a glass of scotch, and sitting right next to him, shoes off, feet tucked under her on my cashmere throw blanket, was Jessica. I stopped in the doorway, my bag slipping from my shoulder. Ethan, I asked, putting a tremor in my voice, what is she doing here? Ethan didn't even stand up. He swirled his drink, looking at me with pure annoyance. We have work to do, Claire. The gala generated a lot of leads. Jessica and I need to go over the client list, and the office AC is down. She's here as my executive assistant. Don't make it weird. Make it weird. I looked at Jessica. She was wearing a tight pencil skirt and a silk blouse with the top 2 buttons undone. She smiled at me, a pitying, sickly sweet smile. "Hi, Mrs. Hayes," she chirped. "So sorry to intrude. Ethan said you wouldn't mind. We're just so swamped." She called him Ethan, not Mr. Hayes. "Ethan. I see," I stammered, looking down. Do you need anything?" "Actually," Ethan said, holding up his empty glass. "We could use some coffee, and maybe bring Jessica some of those cookies you made yesterday. She has a sweet tooth." He was treating me like the maid in my own house with his mistress sitting on my sofa. The rage flared hot in my chest, threatening to break my composure. But I heard Susan's voice in my head. "Play the part. Get the evidence." "Of course," I said softly. "I'll be right back." I went to the kitchen. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the coffee pot. I arranged the cookies on a plate, the cookies I had baked for us, thinking we might watch a movie together. I carried the tray back into the living room. As I set it down on the coffee table, Jessica shifted. Her leg bumped my arm. It wasn't an accident. I felt the deliberate nudge. The pot of hot coffee wobbled. I tried to catch it, but the trajectory was set. The dark liquid splashed out, missing Jessica entirely, but soaking into the rug and splashing onto the hem of the dress I was still holding. My wedding anniversary dress that I had draped over the armchair earlier to steam. "Oh my God," Jessica shrieked, jumping up dramatically. "Look what you did! You almost burned me! I didn't," I stuttered. "Jesus, Claire!" Ethan roared, slamming his glass down. "Can't you do anything right? You're so clumsy. You could have hurt her." "She bumped me," I whispered. "Oh, please." Jessica scoffed, brushing non-existent dust off her skirt. "Why would I do that, Ethan, honey? Maybe she needs to go rest. She seems frantic." She looked at me, her eyes dead cold, and lowered her voice so only I could hear while Ethan grabbed napkins. "You really should just give up. You know you're embarrassing yourself. He doesn't want a maid, Claire. He wants a partner." She leaned in closer, her perfume suffocating me. "You're old news. Just sign the papers and go find a knitting circle." Ethan stood up, looming over me. "Go upstairs, Claire. Get out of our sight. You're ruining the workflow." I looked at the coffee stains spreading on the rug. I looked at my husband, checking Jessica for burns she didn't have. I looked at the woman who was trying to erase my existence. "I'm sorry," I said. The words tasted like ash. "I'll go." I turned and walked away. I climbed the stairs, the sound of Jessica's giggles following me. I went into the master bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet, letting the cold water run. I splashed it on my face once, twice, 3 times, trying to wash away the feeling of degradation. I looked up at the mirror. Water dripped from my chin. My eyes were red-rimmed, my skin pale. I looked broken. But then I stopped. I leaned closer to the glass. He wants a partner. No, he wants a victim. He wants someone to carry his baggage while he walks free. I remembered the code. I remembered the brooch Susan was selling. I remembered the army I was building. The woman in the mirror stopped trembling. Her jaw set, her eyes cleared. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. "You want a war, Ethan," I thought. "I'll give you a war, but you won't even see the soldiers coming until they're standing in your bedroom." I dried my face with a towel, taking my time. I wasn't the maid anymore. I was the architect of his destruction. And I was done serving coffee. If you are still listening to this, if you are feeling that fire in your gut, help me out. Please like this video and comment the number 1 down below. Let me know that you are with me. Let me know that you refuse to be treated like you are invisible. Your support tells me I'm not alone in this fight. Comment 1 right now to show you're on my side. And now listen closely, because this is where the tables start to turn. I stayed in the bathroom for another 10 minutes, composing myself. When I walked back out, I didn't go to bed. I went downstairs. They were still on the couch, but the work had clearly stopped. Ethan's arm was draped over the back of the sofa, his fingers toying with Jessica's hair. They jumped apart slightly when I entered, but not enough to be convincing. "I thought I told you to go to bed," Ethan snapped. "I know," I said, keeping my voice steady and submissive. I wanted to apologize. You're right, Ethan. I've been so stressed lately. I haven't been myself." Ethan blinked, surprised by my capitulation. He exchanged a glance with Jessica. "Well, good. At least you admit it." "I think I need a break. I continued, wringing my hands together to look anxious. Maybe I should go visit my sister in Ohio for a few days, just to clear my head, give you space to work. Ethan's eyes lit up. It was exactly what he wanted. That sounds like a sensible idea, Claire. Very sensible. And, I added, baiting the hook, you've been working so hard too. Maybe you should take a break this weekend. I saw that the weather on Martha's Vineyard is supposed to be beautiful. You could go get some rest. You deserve it. Yeah. I saw Jessica squeeze his knee. Martha's Vineyard was their spot. I knew it from the credit card statements. You know, Ethan said, trying to suppress a smile, that's not a bad idea. I have some investors out there I could meet. A working weekend. Exactly. I smiled weakly. I'll pack a bag and leave tomorrow morning for Ohio. Great, Ethan said, practically dismissing me with a wave of his hand. Go pack. I went upstairs, but I didn't pack for Ohio. I waited. An hour later, Ethan came up to bed looking smug. He thought he had won. He thought he had bullied me into submission. He went into the bathroom to shower. The moment the water turned on, I moved. I grabbed his iPad from the nightstand. I knew he synced everything. I had downloaded a specialized parental control app earlier that day, Susan's suggestion. It was designed to track teenagers, but it worked wonders on cheating husbands. It recorded keystrokes, GPS location, and messages. My fingers flew. I installed the app, hid the icon deep in a folder of system utilities, and synced it to my burner phone. Passcode 1234. He hadn't changed it in 10 years. Pathetic. I heard the shower turn off. I placed the iPad back exactly where it was, wiping my fingerprints off the screen with my sleeve. I slipped into bed just as the bathroom door opened. The next morning, I put on a performance worthy of an Oscar. I packed a suitcase, kissed Ethan on the cheek, resisting the urge to vomit, and drove away. Drive safe, he called out, barely looking up from his phone. Don't rush back. I drove around the corner, parked in a shopping center lot, and pulled out my burner phone. The dot on the GPS map was moving. He wasn't going to the office. He was going to the airport. I watched the screen as the text messages started rolling in. Jessica. The witch is gone. Flight leaves at 2 p.m. Pack the bikini. I like. Ethan. Finally. I thought she'd never leave. Should we book the penthouse suite? Jessica. Already done, baby. Corporate card. Gotcha, I thought. But I wasn't just going to watch them leave. I needed to catch them, and I needed it to be undeniable. I called Susan. He's going to Martha's Vineyard, I said. Flight leaves at 2. Perfect, Susan said. But we don't want them on the vineyard. We want them here where we can film them. How do we stop them? Did you know, Susan asked, her voice dripping with amusement, that as a joint account holder, you can report cards lost or stolen, and you can request an immediate freeze on all travel bookings associated with that card for suspicious activity? I smiled. I didn't know that. Call the credit card company, Susan commanded. Flag the airline tickets. Flag the hotel. Flag everything. Ground him. I dialed the number. Yes, hello, this is Claire Hayes. I believe my husband's card has been compromised. There are some charges for a flight to Martha's Vineyard. Yes, that's not us. Please cancel them immediately and freeze the card. Yes, thank you. I hung up and watched the GPS dot. It was approaching JFK Airport. 10 minutes later, the dot stopped. Then it paced back and forth at the terminal drop-off. Then a new text popped up on my screen. Ethan. Damn it. Card declined. They say it's fraud. Airline won't let us board without payment, and my other cards are maxed. Jessica. Are you kidding me? What do we do? Ethan, calm down. We'll go back to my place. She's in Ohio. We have the whole house to ourselves. We can leave tomorrow once I yell at the bank. They were coming back to the house, thinking it was empty. It was a trap, and they were walking right into it. I started the car. Susan, I said into the headset. They're turning around. Meet me at the house. Bring the videographer. We're already on our way, she replied. I drove back to the neighborhood parking 3 streets away to avoid being seen. I crept through the neighbors' backyards. Mrs. Oz. Higgins saw me, but I put a finger to my lips, and she, bless her heart, just winked. She hated Ethan, too. I let myself in through the back kitchen door, which I had unlocked before I left. The house was silent. I waited in the pantry, hidden behind shelves of canned goods. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. 20 minutes later, the front door opened. "Stupid bank," Ethan was grumbling. "I'll fire whoever authorized that freeze." "Forget about it, baby," Jessica's voice purred. "We're here now, and we're alone." I heard giggles, the sound of shoes dropping on the hardwood floor, the sound of a zipper. "Right here?" Ethan asked, sounding breathless. "Right here on her precious sofa." Jessica laughed. "Let's christen it." I waited. I counted to 10. I wanted them committed. I wanted them vulnerable. I heard the heavy sounds of movement, the moans that made my skin crawl. Now I texted Susan. "Go." I kicked open the pantry door and marched into the living room. At the same moment, the front door burst open. Susan walked in, flanked by a burly man with a professional video camera perched on his shoulder, the red recording light blinking ominously. The scene in the living room was grotesque. Ethan and Jessica were entangled on the sofa, my sofa half undressed. Ethan's shirt was unbuttoned to his navel, his pants around his ankles. Jessica was straddling him, wearing nothing but expensive lingerie that I knew I had paid for. When the front door crashed open, the sound was like a gunshot in the silent house. Ethan let out a yelp that was anything but masculine, scrambling backwards so frantically he fell off the couch and landed hard on the floor. Jessica shrieked, grabbing a throw pillow to cover herself, her eyes wide with shock. "Smile," Susan shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos like a whip. "You're on camera." The cameraman didn't say a word. He just zoomed in. The red light of the camera was an unblinking eye, capturing every inch of their shame. "Claire?" Ethan stammered, trying to pull his pants up with trembling hands. His face was a mask of pure horror. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Ohio." I stood in the center of the room looking down at him. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, icy calm. I pulled out my phone. "And you were supposed to be in a meeting," I said, my voice steady. "But here you are, screwing your secretary in our living room." I held up my phone. "I'm live streaming this, Ethan. Private stream just to the board of directors and your top 3 investors. I think they're watching right now." Ethan's face went from red to ghost white. No, you didn't. Turn it off. Turn it off, Claire." He lunged at me, but the cameraman, who I later learned was an ex-linebacker, stepped in front of me, blocking Ethan's path with a wall of muscle. "I wouldn't do that, Mr. Hayes," the cameraman growled. "That would be assault. And we're already recording adultery." Jessica, realizing the gravity of the situation, turned vicious. She dropped the scared victim act instantly. "You crazy bitch!" she screamed at me. "You set us up. This is illegal. You can't film us." Susan stepped forward, adjusting her glasses coolly. "Actually, under New York law, there is no expectation of privacy in the common areas of a home when a crime is being documented. And given that you are trespassing—" "I'm not trespassing," Jessica spat. "I'm his girlfriend." "You're the mistress," Susan corrected, "and right now you're the evidence." Ethan finally managed to zip his pants. He tried to regain some shred of authority, puffing out his chest. "Get out!" he snarled at Susan and the cameraman. "Get out of my house!" "It's not your house," I said quietly. Ethan wheeled on me. "What?" "I said it's not your house," I repeated. "Check the deed, Ethan. When we bought this place 15 years ago, your credit was shot from the first failed startup. Remember, my parents co-signed. The deed is in the Thompson Family Trust. You're just a tenant." It was a bluff, a partial bluff. The deed was complicated, but in this moment, confidence was everything. Ethan looked confused, his brain misfiring. That's not true. We're married. Everything is 50-50. "Not after today," Susan interjected. "We have footage of infidelity, we have records of dissipation of assets, and we have proof of IP theft." Ethan froze. The mention of IP theft hit him harder than the adultery. He knew. Deep down he knew the code wasn't his. "Claire?" His voice changed instantly. It went from angry to wheedling. The manipulator switched masks. "Baby, look, let's not do this. Let's not blow everything up. We can talk. Send these people away." Jessica means nothing. It was just a mistake. A moment of weakness. Jessica gasped, turning to him. Excuse me. A mistake. You told me you loved me. You said she was a boring old hag. Shut up, Jessica! Ethan roared at her. He turned back to me, reaching out a hand. Claire, please. Think about the company. Think about us. I built this life for us. I looked at his hand, the hand that had held Jessica's waist at the gala, the hand that had signed away our savings. You didn't build anything, Ethan, I said. I built it, and now I'm taking it back. I nodded to Susan. I'm done here. Wait, Ethan shouted as I turned to the door. You can't just leave. Where are you going to go? You have no money. I froze the accounts. I stopped at the door and looked back. I have something better than money, Ethan. I have the truth, and by tomorrow morning, everyone else will have it too. I walked out of the house, leaving him standing in the wreckage of his own making, with a mistress who now hated him, and a lawyer who was about to skin him alive. But Ethan wasn't done. As I walked down the driveway, I heard the door slam open again. Get out! He screamed after me, his voice cracking. Fine, leave, but don't think you're coming back. I'm changing the locks. I'll ruin you, Claire. You'll be begging on the street. I got into my car. My hands were trembling again, but this time from adrenaline. I drove away, watching my home disappear in the rearview mirror. I had nowhere to go. I had $20 in my pocket. I was technically homeless, but as I merged onto the highway heading toward the cheap motel Susan had booked for me, I realized something. I was free. The first battle was won, but the war had just begun. Ethan was wounded, and a wounded narcissist is dangerous. He would come after me with everything he had. He would lie, cheat, and steal to destroy me. I gripped the steering wheel. Bring it on. Because what Ethan didn't know was that while I was packing my bag for Ohio, I had also made a copy of the server hard drive. I held the keys to the kingdom in my purse. And tomorrow I was going to find a lock to put them in. But I didn't know yet that the hardest part wasn't fighting Ethan. It was facing the emptiness of starting over at 45. And I certainly didn't expect that the first person to offer me a hand would be the last person I ever thought I'd see again. The adrenaline that had carried me out of that house faded about 3 miles down the interstate. In its place came a crushing, suffocating reality. I was 45 years old. I had just walked out on my entire life. And as I pulled into the parking lot of the Red Pine Motel, the only place Susan could find that took cash late at night, I realized I was terrified. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. The neon sign outside buzzed with a rhythmic zzz that flickered through the thin curtains. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, still wearing my Ohio trip clothes, and stared at the wall. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank app, or rather, a notification of failure. Alert joint checking account overdraft. Balance minus $450. Alert joint savings account. Transfer complete. Balance $0. Ethan worked fast. While I was driving here, he had drained everything. He hadn't just frozen the accounts, he had emptied them. He knew I had no credit cards. He was trying to starve me out, to force me crawling back on my knees to beg for grocery money. It was financial abuse, plain and simple, executed with the cold precision of a man who viewed his wife as an unruly employee. I checked my purse. I had the $20 in cash. I had a half-eaten granola bar, and I had the hard drive containing the server backup I had swiped earlier. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the sounds of strangers in the hallway, clutching my purse to my chest. I felt small. I felt invisible. The voice in my head, Ethan's voice, kept whispering, "You're nothing without me. You're just a middle-aged woman with no skills and no future." By morning, the despair had turned into a dull ache. I was hungry, but I couldn't afford breakfast. I used the motel's free coffee to wake myself up. It tasted like burnt rubber, but it was hot. My phone rang. It was Ethan. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. Finally, a text popped up. "Ethan, I hope you're enjoying the streets. I've spoken to our friends. Everyone knows about your mental breakdown. Don't bother calling anyone. They think you're off your meds. Come home. Apologize to Jessica and maybe we can discuss an allowance. Apologize to Jessica. That was the spark. That was the tiny ember that landed in the pool of gasoline inside my soul. He wanted me to apologize to the woman who was sleeping in my bed. I typed back 2 words, "See you in court." Then I blocked his number. I washed my face in the tiny motel sink, put on my blazer, and looked in the mirror. I looked tired. My eyes were puffy. But I wasn't the woman from yesterday. I was a woman with nothing left to lose. And that is the most dangerous creature on earth. I drove to a pawn shop 3 towns over. It was a seedy place with bars on the windows. I placed my wedding ring on the counter. It was a 2-carat solitaire, decent quality. "How much?" I asked. The guy behind the counter squinted at it. $1,200. "It's insured for $10,000, I countered. $1,200, he repeated, not looking up. "Take it or leave it." I took it. It felt like selling a piece of my soul, but as I walked out with the cash in my hand, I felt lighter. That ring had been a shackle. Now it was seed money. I called Susan. "I have cash for the filing fees," I said. "File the divorce petition, cite adultery, and Susan, go for the jugular." "Already drafting it." Susan's voice was grim but satisfied. "But Claire, he's already locked you out of the company email. He's telling clients you retired due to health issues. You need to move fast if you want to salvage your reputation." "I know," I said. "I'm not retiring, I'm rebranding." I spent the next 3 days in that motel room turning it into a war room. I used the motel Wi-Fi to scour LinkedIn. I looked up every client Ethan had neglected, every investor he had insulted, every mid-level manager he had fired for being too smart. I was rebuilding my network from the ashes. But I needed a partner. I needed someone with capital and credibility to back me up because, let's face it, a homeless woman with a laptop is a hard sell. That's when I thought of Mark. He had stood up for me at the gala. He had seen the truth, but asking him for help felt humiliating. We hadn't been close in 20 years. Would he think I was using him? I stared at his number on my screen for an hour. Finally, I hit call. "Jennings!" His voice answered on the first ring. "Mark?" I cleared my throat, trying to sound professional and not like I was calling from a cheap motel. "It's Claire. Claire Thompson." There was a pause. A long, terrifying pause. "Claire." His voice softened instantly. "My God, are you okay? I've been worried sick since you ran out of the plaza." I'm surviving," I said. "Mark, I need to talk to you. Business. Strictly business." "Name the place," he said. "I'll be there." "There's a coffee shop on 4th and Main. It's quiet." "I know it," he said. "I'll see you in an hour." I hung up and looked at my reflection. I tried to smooth my hair. I tried to iron my shirt with the motel hairdryer. I had to look like a CEO, not a victim. I walked into that meeting with my head held high, clutching the hard drive like a weapon. I didn't know it yet, but that coffee date was about to change the trajectory of my entire life. The coffee shop was warm, smelling of roasted beans and cinnamon, a stark contrast to the stale air of my motel room. Mark was already there, sitting at a corner booth. He stood up the moment he saw me. He wasn't wearing a suit today, just a casual button-down and a blazer, but he still looked like the most put-together person in the room. "Claire," he said, reaching out as if to hug me, then hesitating and settling for a warm handshake. His hands were strong, steady. "You look like I've been living out of a suitcase." I offered a wry smile, sitting down. "I was going to say resilient," he corrected gently, sitting opposite me. "I heard about what happened. The rumors are flying, Claire. Ethan is telling people you had a nervous breakdown and tried to attack his staff." "His staff," I scoffed. "Is that what he calls Jessica now?" I took a deep breath, placing my hands on the table. "Mark, I didn't come here to cry on your shoulder about my marriage. I came here because I have a proposition." Mark leaned back, intrigued. "I'm listening." "Ethan thinks he is Hayes Industries." I began, my voice gaining strength. "He thinks the brand is his smile, his handshakes, his dinners. But you and I both know that company is built on one thing, the prediction model, the algorithm." Mark nodded slowly. It's the best in the market. Or it used to be. It used to be, I agreed, because I stopped updating it 2 years ago when he started funneling our R&D budget into Jessica's jewelry collection. Mark's eyebrows shot up. You wrote the updates? I wrote the original, Mark. I said, locking eyes with him. I wrote every line of code in that kernel. Ethan can barely open a PDF. I pulled the hard drive out of my bag and placed it on the table between us. This drive contains the next generation of the algorithm, I said. Project Phoenix. I've been working on it in secret for 3 years. It's faster, deeper, and uses AI learning that makes Ethan's current platform look like an abacus. It's ready to launch. Mark looked at the drive, then back at me. A slow smile spread across his face, a genuine, impressed smile. You built a better mousetrap while living inside the mouse hole. Exactly, I said. But I have no capital, I have no office, and currently I have a credit score that's probably in free fall thanks to my husband. I need an angel investor, Mark. I'm starting a new firm, Thompson Financial, and I want to bury Hayes Industries. Mark didn't blink. He didn't ask for a business plan. He didn't ask for a risk assessment. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. How much do you need to start? He asked, uncapping a fountain pen. I was stunned. Mark, you haven't even seen the code. This is risky. Ethan will sue. He will try to destroy us. Mark wrote a number on the check, tore it out, and slid it across the table. I looked at it. It was for $200,000. I'm not investing in the code, Claire, Mark said softly. I'm investing in the architect. I watched you in college. You were the smartest person in every room we walked into. Ethan just talked louder. I've been waiting 20 years for you to realize you didn't need him. Tears pricked my eyes, sudden and hot. I blinked them back furiously. I don't know what to say. This is a loan. I will pay you back with interest. Call it an investment. Mark smiled. For 10% equity. I want to be partners, Claire. Real partners. We shook on it, and just like that, Thompson Financial Consulting was born. Not in a boardroom, but in a coffee shop fueled by revenge and funded by the only man who had ever truly seen me. I moved out of the motel the next day. I rented a small, efficient office space in a shared working building downtown. I bought a new laptop, a new phone, and a new wardrobe. Sharp, professional, intimidating. I spent the next month working 18-hour days. I reached out to the clients I had identified. My pitch was simple. You know the quality you used to get from Hayes Industries 5 years ago? That was me, and I'm back, but better. The first client to jump ship was Henderson Logistics, a massive account that Ethan had taken for granted. When I showed Mr. Henderson the projections from my new algorithm, his jaw dropped. This is incredible, Claire, he said. Ethan told us this kind of accuracy was impossible. Ethan doesn't know the difference between accuracy and arrogance, I replied. We signed the contract. It was a 6-figure deal. I went home that night to a small, clean apartment I had leased and popped a bottle of cheap champagne. I was tired, my back ached, and I was still in the middle of a nasty divorce. But I had my own name on the door. I had my own money in the bank. And Ethan was about to find out that while he was busy playing house with his mistress, his castle was being dismantled brick by brick. Word of Thompson Financial spread through the New York business community like wildfire. It turns out people talk. And when the quiet, unstable wife suddenly emerges as a brilliant strategist stealing top-tier clients, people talk even more. I was in my office reviewing the quarterly projections for Henderson Logistics when Susan called. Have you seen the news? She asked, her voice gleeful. I've been busy working, Susan. Unlike some people, I quipped. Check the business section of the New York Times, page 3. I clicked open the browser. There it was. A headline that made my heart sing. Hayes Industries stocks tumble amidst rumors of technical failures and executive turmoil. I read the article greedily. Apparently, since I left, the Hayes prediction model had been throwing errors. Clients were complaining about data inaccuracies, and Ethan was nowhere to be found. The article mentioned insiders, claiming the CEO was frequently absent and that a new executive assistant was causing friction with senior staff. I leaned back in my chair, a satisfied smile playing on my lips. "It's starting." "It gets better," Susan said. "Ethan's lawyer called me this morning. They want to settle. They're offering you the house and a small lump sum if you sign an NDA and drop the adultery claim." "The house," I laughed. "He wants to give me the house he's currently living in with Jessica. Where does he plan to go?" "He doesn't have a plan, Claire. He's panicking. He needs the lawsuit to go away because investors are getting spooked. The threat of the video is hanging over him." "No deal," I said firmly. "I don't want the house. It's tainted. I want what we discussed. I want the IP audit." "I was hoping you'd say that," Susan chuckled. "We have a deposition scheduled for next Tuesday. Be ready. He's going to bring Jessica." Tuesday came. I walked into the conference room at Susan's firm, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car paid for with my own earnings. Mark was there, sitting quietly in the corner as my business advisor. Ethan walked in. He looked terrible. His tan had faded into a sallow gray. He had gained weight, and his eyes were bloodshot. Jessica trailed behind him, wearing a designer dress that looked ridiculous for a legal meeting. She glared at me, clutching a Louis Vuitton bag like a shield. "Claire." Ethan grunted, not making eye contact. He sat down heavily. "Ethan?" I nodded coolly. "Jessica. Nice bag. Did you buy that with the R&D budget?" "Watch it," Ethan snapped. "Let's get this over with. You want money, fine. How much to make you go away?" "This isn't about alimony, Ethan," Susan interjected, sliding a thick file across the table. "This is about intellectual property theft." Ethan frowned. "What are you talking about? The company owns everything." "Actually," I spoke up, my voice calm and deadly. "The company owns the trademark. But the source code, the underlying architecture of the Hayes prediction model version 1.0 through version 4.0, that belongs to the original creator. And since there was never a formal IP assignment agreement signed by me, and since I wrote it before the company was incorporated—" "You're bluffing," Ethan scoffed. "You didn't write that. We did it together." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Okay, Ethan, tell me. In the yield curve subroutine line 4052, what is the variable baby blue defined as?" The room went silent. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. He began to sweat. "I'll tell you," I continued. "It's a date, November 14th, the due date of the son we lost. I put it there as a watermark, a digital grave marker. It's in every version of the software you're selling right now." Ethan's face turned the color of ash. Jessica looked between us, confused and bored. "What does that mean, Ethan?" she whined. "What is she talking about?" "It means," Susan said with a shark-like grin, "that every dollar Hayes Industries has made using that software for the past 20 years is subject to copyright infringement claims. We're not just asking for half the marital assets, Mr. Hayes. We're asking for 100% of the profits derived from Claire's intellectual property, plus damages." Ethan slumped in his chair. He looked like a balloon that had been popped. The arrogance, the bluster, it all drained away, leaving a terrified middle-aged man who realized he had built his castle on quicksand. "You can't do this," he whispered. "It will bankrupt the company." "You should have thought about that," I said, leaning forward, "before you introduced your mistress as your wife." I stood up. "See you in court, Ethan. Or you can accept our new settlement offer. Full liquidation of your assets, 50% of the company's stock transferred to me, and you resign as CEO immediately." I walked out of the room, Mark right beside me. As the door closed, I heard Jessica's shrill voice screaming, "You told me she was stupid. You told me she knew nothing." I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking on the marble floor. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The weeks following the deposition were a spectacle of chaos at Hayes Industries. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, and I admit, I watched with a certain degree of grim satisfaction. With the threat of the IP lawsuit looming, investors started pulling out in droves. Mark's connections helped spread the word discreetly. "Hayes Industries is a sinking ship. The captain is incompetent, and the navigator just left to start her own fleet." Jessica, proving true to her nature, was useless in a crisis. Reports from my old contacts inside the company painted a pathetic picture. She spent her days online shopping for things she could no longer afford, screaming at the IT department to just fix the computer thingy, and accusing secretaries of spying on her. Ethan was spiraling. He was drinking at the office. He missed meetings. And when the system finally crashed, a major server failure that I knew was inevitable due to lack of maintenance, he had no one to call. He actually tried to call me. It was a Tuesday night. I was working late at Thompson Financial Mark, sitting on the sofa reading a report. My phone rang. Ethan Hayes. I put it on speaker. Claire. His voice was slurred. Claire, pick up. The dashboard is down. Henderson is threatening to sue. I don't know the admin password for the root server. You never told me. I told you 5 times, Ethan, I said calmly. It's in the manual I wrote. The one you used as a coaster for your scotch. I can't find it, he shouted, panic rising. Just tell me. Help me, Claire, for old time's sake. The company is bleeding. I'm not tech support, Ethan, I said, and I'm certainly not your support anymore. Hire a consultant. Oh, wait, you fired the good ones. Please, he begged. Jessica is driving me crazy. She doesn't understand the pressure. She just wants to go to Cabo. I need you. You were always the one who fixed things. Mark looked up from his report, his eyes narrowing. He reached over and took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. You broke it, Ethan, I said softly. You fix it. I hung up. That sounded pathetic, Mark noted. It was, I sighed. He's realizing that a trophy mistress doesn't come with a troubleshooting manual. But the chaos wasn't just professional. It was personal. As the money dried up, the love nest began to rot. Susan updated me on the asset freeze. Since Ethan refused my settlement offer, initially, the court had ordered a temporary freeze on all liquid assets until the IP audit was complete. That meant no salary for Ethan, no shopping sprees for Jessica. I heard from a neighbor that police were called to our old house twice in 1 week for domestic disturbances. Apparently, Jessica didn't react well to being told she had to return the leased Porsche. One evening, I received an email from an anonymous sender. It was a video file. I opened it. It was shaky footage taken from a phone, likely by a disgruntled employee. It showed Jessica in the lobby of Hayes Industries throwing a vase at Ethan. You lied to me, she was screaming in the video. You said you were a millionaire. You're nothing but a broke old loser. I wasted 2 years of my youth on you. Ethan was trying to shield his face. Jessica, baby, calm down. It's just a liquidity crunch. Once I win the lawsuit. You're not going to win, she shrieked. She owns you. Everyone says she owns you. She stormed out, leaving Ethan standing in the lobby, surrounded by shattered glass and staring employees. I closed the laptop. I didn't feel happy. I felt a profound sense of closure. The facade was gone. The image he cared so much about was destroyed. He's alone, I whispered. Mark stood up and walked over to my desk. He turned my chair so I was facing him. He chose this Claire, Mark said firmly. Don't you dare feel guilty. I don't feel guilty, I said, looking up at him. I feel free, finally. Mark smiled a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Good. Because I have a question for you, and it has nothing to do with business. Oh, are you free for dinner? There's a new Italian place on the river, and I promise not to talk about algorithms or yield curves. I looked at this man, this steady, brilliant, kind man who had bet on me when I had nothing. I would love that, I said. And for the first time in 20 years, I walked out of an office, not to go home to a man who ignored me, but to walk beside a man who saw me. The day of the final hearing arrived 6 months after the gala. The courtroom was cold, sterile, and smelled of floor wax. This was it, the moment of reckoning. Ethan sat at the defendant's table. He looked 20 years older. His suit was wrinkled. He was alone. Jessica was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had it she had moved on to a plastic surgeon in Miami the moment the credit card stopped working. Susan was in her element. She laid out the case with surgical precision. The forensic accountant presented the charts showing the dissipation of assets. The tech expert verified the baby blue watermark in the code. Ethan's lawyer, a tired-looking man who clearly hadn't been paid in weeks, tried to argue that my contribution was marital property and therefore owned by the company. Then Susan called me to the stand. I walked up, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. I looked at Ethan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mrs. Hayes," Susan asked, "why did you place that specific date in the code?" I took a breath. November 14th was the day my son was supposed to be born. I was in the hospital grieving. My husband, Mr. Hayes, told me to work. He told me the company was more important than my grief. So I poured everything I had into that code. It wasn't just software. It was my survival. It was the only thing I had left of myself. I paused, my voice trembling slightly, but staying strong. He took the credit. He took the money. He took the fame. I let him because I loved him. But when he tried to take my dignity, when he tried to erase my existence, I realized that code was the only child I had left, and I wasn't going to let him steal that too. The judge, a stern woman with glasses, looked from me to Ethan. Her expression was unreadable, but I saw her jaw tighten. The judgment was swift and brutal. "Mr. Hayes," the judge said, looking down her nose at him, "the evidence of intellectual property theft is overwhelming. The evidence of dissipation of marital assets is undeniable, and your conduct, frankly, is reprehensible." She slammed the gavel. "I rule in favor of the plaintiff. Claire Thompson is recognized as the sole owner of the Hayes Prediction Model source code. Hayes Industries is ordered to pay retroactive royalties in the amount of $15 million. Furthermore, due to the dissipation of assets, the marital home is awarded solely to Ms. Thompson. Mr. Hayes is responsible for all legal fees. $15 million. Ethan put his head in his hands. It was a death sentence for him. He didn't have $15 million. He didn't have 15,000. Susan squeezed my hand under the table. "We won," she whispered. "We got everything." As the bailiff dismissed us, Ethan stood up. He walked over to me. He looked like a ghost. "Claire," he rasped, "you can't do this. I'll be on the street." I looked at him. I remembered the night he kicked me out. I remembered the mentally unstable lie. "You have a degree in sales, Ethan," I said calmly. "I'm sure you can sell yourself to someone else. Just don't use my code to do it." I turned and walked out of the courtroom. Mark was waiting in the hallway. He didn't say anything. He just opened his arms, and I stepped into them. I buried my face in his chest, breathing in the scent of clean soap and safety. "It's over," I whispered. "No," Mark said, kissing the top of my head. "It's just beginning." We walked out of the courthouse into the bright New York sunlight. I checked my phone. A text from my real estate agent. "Locksmith is meeting us at the house in an hour." I was going back to the house, not to live there. I couldn't live there again, but to reclaim it, to purge it, and to close the door forever. The house felt different when I unlocked the door with the new keys. It felt empty. The ghost of my marriage was gone, replaced by the stale smell of neglect. Jessica had done a number on the place before she fled. The curtains were torn. There were wine stains on the carpet. My garden, my beautiful rose garden, was overgrown with weeds. Mark walked through the rooms with me, silent and supportive. "I'm going to sell it," I said, running a hand over to the kitchen counter where I had made those pancakes on that fateful morning. "I don't want it. I don't want the memories." "Whatever you want," Mark said. "It's your asset now." We went out to the patio. The sun was setting over the yard. It was quiet. "Mark," I said, turning to him, "you've been incredible through all of this. Why did you help me? You barely knew me for 20 years. Mark leaned against the railing, looking out at the overgrown garden. "I knew you enough, Claire. In college. I was in love with you. Did you know that?" My breath caught. "What?" "I was." He chuckled softly, a self-deprecating sound. "But you only had eyes for Ethan. He was the loud, charismatic one. I was the nerd in the library. So I stepped back. I watched you build him up. I watched you disappear into his shadow. It broke my heart, honestly." He turned to look at me, his eyes intense and vulnerable. "When I saw you at the plaza that night, seeing him humiliate you like that, it woke something up in me. I wasn't going to let him destroy you. Not again." He took a step closer. I didn't help you for the money, Claire, or for the business. I helped you because I wanted to see you shine again. And you are shining. You are the most brilliant, strong, beautiful woman I have ever known. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the kindness in his eyes, the gray at his temples, the patience that had waited 2 decades. I'm not the same girl I was in college, I whispered. I'm 45. I have baggage. I have scars. So do I, Mark said, reaching out to cup my cheek. We all have scars, Claire. They just mean we survived. I leaned into his touch. It felt electric yet familiar. I started, my voice trembling. I think I might have chosen the wrong man 20 years ago. You chose the man you needed then, Mark said softly. But you can choose the man you want now. He kissed me. It wasn't a devouring, desperate kiss like Ethan's used to be. It was slow. It was reverent. It tasted like promise. It tasted like a future where I didn't have to shrink to fit someone else's space. We stood there on the patio of my reclaimed house as the sun went down on my old life and rose on something entirely new. I want to sell this place, I said again, pulling back but keeping his hand in mine. And I want to use the money to start a scholarship fund for women in tech, women who are overshadowed by men. Mark smiled that proud smile that made my knees weak. That sounds like a brilliant plan, CEO Thompson. While I was building a new life, Ethan was hitting rock bottom, and gravity, as it turns out, is a harsh mistress. Without money, without the company, and without his reputation, Ethan was radioactive. No one would hire him. His friends from the country club stopped returning his calls. He was living in a cheap studio apartment driving a beat-up rental car. But the final blow came from the law. Remember the video Susan and I took, the one of the affair? Well, during the forensic audit of the company, we found something else. Ethan hadn't just used marital funds for jewelry. He had used investor funds. That's wire fraud. That's a federal crime. I didn't have to press charges. The SEC did it for me. I was in my office at Thompson Financial, now occupying a gorgeous floor in a skyscraper overlooking the lake, when I saw the news alert, former CEO of Hayes Industries arrested on fraud charges. There was a photo of Ethan being led out of his shabby apartment building in handcuffs. He looked broken. He was wearing a stained T-shirt. He looked at the camera with the eyes of a trapped animal. And Jessica. The police had caught up with her too. She had been trying to fence some of the jewelry she stole from our house jewelry that was technically evidence in the fraud investigation. She was arrested in Miami. It was a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. 2 greedy, empty people who thought they could consume the world only to end up consuming each other. I felt a pang of pity, just a small one, not for the man he was, but for the potential he had wasted. He could have had it all. We could have had it all, if only he had been capable of sharing the spotlight. Mark walked in, seeing the news on my screen. He came up behind me and rested his hands on my shoulders. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I am," I said. "It's just sad. Such a waste." "It is," Mark agreed. "But justice has a way of balancing the scales." "I'm not going to visit him," I said decisively. "I have nothing to say to him." "You don't have to," Mark said. "You have a board meeting in 10 minutes, and we need to discuss the expansion into Europe." I smiled, turning my chair to face him. "Europe, why not?" Mark grinned. "Thompson Financial is global now, unless you want to slow down." "I'm just getting started," I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. I walked into that boardroom not as Mrs. Hayes, the betrayed wife, but as Claire Thompson, the titan of industry. And as I led the meeting, commanding the room with confidence and grace, I knew that Ethan Hayes was nothing more than a footnote in my biography. 6 months later, I was leaving the office late. It was raining a cold New York drizzle. As I walked to my car in the parking garage, a figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. I jumped, clutching my keys like a weapon. "Who's there?" "Claire." The voice was raspy, broken. It was Ethan. He was out on bail awaiting trial. He looked emaciated. His clothes hung off him. His hair was thinning and unkempt. He looked like a homeless man. "Ethan," I said, keeping my distance. You're not supposed to be within 500 feet of me. I have a restraining order." "I know," he said, holding up his hands. They were shaking. "I'm not here to hurt you. I needed to see you." "Why?" "I'm hungry, Claire," he whispered. "I have no money. No one will help me. Even my parents, they won't talk to me." He took a step closer, desperation in his eyes. "I made a mistake. I know that now. Jessica. She was poison. You were the only good thing in my life. You were my luck." "I wasn't your luck, Ethan," I said coldly. "I was your brain, and I was your heart, and you cut me out." "I can change," he pleaded, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "I can be better. Please, Claire, just a little help. Alone for old time's sake. Remember the good times. Remember when we started." I looked at him. I tried to find the charming young man I had loved in the diner 20 years ago, but he was gone, consumed by his own ego. "I remember," I said. "I remember I gave you everything, and I remember you told the world I was crazy because you were ashamed of me." I opened my purse. Ethan's eyes lit up thinking I was getting my wallet. Instead, I pulled out a business card. It was for a local homeless shelter and job placement program, one of the charities I now supported. I held it out to him. "I won't give you money, Ethan," I said. "Money was what ruined you. But if you want to change, if you really want to rebuild, go there. They help people start over from zero, like I had to." He stared at the card, his face crumbling. "You want me to go to a shelter? Me Ethan Hayes." "Ethan Hayes doesn't exist anymore," I said softly. "You're just a man now, and it's time you learned how to stand on your own 2 feet." I dropped the card into his hand. He looked at it, then at me with a mixture of hatred and shame. "You're cold, Claire," he spat. "No," I said, opening my car door. "I'm just indifferent, and that's worse." I got in the car and drove away. I watched him in the rearview mirror, standing alone in the dark, clutching the card. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. That was the last time I ever saw him. The wedding was small, just family and close friends. We held it in the garden of the new house Mark and I had bought, a beautiful, airy place near the lake filled with light. I wore a cream-colored suit, not a white dress. I wasn't a blushing bride. I was a woman who had walked through fire and come out made of gold. Susan was my maid of honor, of course. She cried through the whole ceremony, which was unlike her. "I'm just so happy you got the upgrade," she whispered to me as she adjusted my veil. Mark stood under the floral arch. He looked handsome, steady, and so full of love, it took my breath away. When I walked down the aisle, he didn't look at his watch. He didn't look at his phone. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world. We wrote our own vows. "Claire," Mark said, his voice thick with emotion, "I waited a lifetime to find you, and I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel invisible again. I promise to be your partner in every sense of the word. You are my equal. You're my safe harbor." "Mark," I said, my voice ringing clear and strong, "you taught me that love isn't about shrinking to fit. It's about growing together. You saw me when I couldn't see myself. I promise to love you, to trust you, and to build a life with you that is real and honest and kind." We exchanged rings, simple gold bands, no flashy diamonds. We didn't need them. As we kissed, the small crowd cheered. I looked out at the faces of the people who loved us, my staff from Thompson Financial, Susan, my sister. And then I saw something beyond the garden gate across the street. A figure was watching. A man in a faded coat, looking old and tired. It was Ethan. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't making a scene. He was just watching the happiness he had thrown away, watching the woman he had discarded being cherished by a better man. Our eyes met for a split second across the distance. He looked down, turned up his collar, and walked away, disappearing down the street. I felt a final weight lift off my shoulders. He was the ghost of my past, fading into the background where he belonged. I turned back to Mark. "I love you," I said. "I love you too, Mrs. Jennings," he smiled. "Actually," I grinned, "it's Miss Thompson Jennings. I'm keeping my name this time." Mark laughed and pulled me into a hug. I wouldn't have it any other way. So here I am, 2 years later. Thompson Financial is now one of the top consulting firms in the Midwest. Mark and I travel. We work. We laugh. We have a partnership that is built on respect, not ownership. I often think about that night at the Plaza Hotel, the night I thought my life was over, the night I stood in the shadows and watched my husband disown me. It was the most painful moment of my life, but it was also the best thing that ever happened to me. If Ethan hadn't betrayed me, I would still be in that kitchen making pancakes for a man who didn't appreciate them. I would still be hiding my brilliance. I would still be invisible. Sometimes you have to be completely broken down to rebuild yourself the way you were meant to be. I know there are women listening to this who are feeling invisible right now. Maybe your husband overlooks you. Maybe your family takes you for granted. Maybe you feel like you've wasted your best years on people who don't deserve you. I want to tell you this. It is never too late. You are not too old. You are not past your prime. You are not just anything. You are powerful. You have value. And if the people around you can't see that, then it is time to change the people around you. Don't be afraid to walk away. Don't be afraid to start over with $20 in your pocket and a fire in your belly. Because the only person who can truly save you is you. Ethan Hayes is currently serving 3 years for fraud. Jessica is working at a diner in Florida looking for her next victim. And me, I'm Claire Thompson Jennings. I'm a CEO. I'm a wife to a good man. And I am finally truly myself. Thank you for listening to my story. And now I have a request for you. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt the pain of betrayal or the joy of reclaiming your power, please like this video and share it with a friend who might need to hear it. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to restart your life? I read every single comment and I want to hear your story. Remember, you are stronger than you think. Until next time.